Hello and welcome to this Curious About live session from Glasgow Science Centre. My name is Patrick and our guest for this session is Caitlin Godfrey, who is the Learning and Community Engagement Manager at the Marine Conservation Society. Today, Caitlin is going to be talking to us about Scotland's amazing oceans and marine life and how we can help to protect them. There's going to be plenty of time for Caitlin to answer your questions after her talk, so please write those in the chat box on YouTube and we will try and get through as many as we possibly can. Hello, Caitlin, and thank you for joining us for this session.
Good morning, Patrick. Thank you so much for having me this morning. And hi, everyone who's joining us this morning. Thank you for coming along.
It's so great to have you, Caitlin. We're so excited for this presentation, so take it away, and I'm excited to ask some questions after.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Patrick. So good morning, everybody, and thanks for coming along this morning. As Patrick said, my name is Caitlin, and I work for the Marine Conservation Society. So the Marine Conservation Society is a charity. We work all across the UK, and we really work to try and help protect and clean up the seas around the UK. Now, this morning, we're going to be talking specifically about some of the restoration work that we do in Scotland and also some of the amazing wildlife that we can see in Scotland as well. But starting off first then, obviously you're sat in your classrooms or maybe you're at home watching this. I would like to start with asking you a few questions. So pop your hand up for me if you've ever been to the seaside. This is the first question. Pop your hand straight up for me if you've been to the seaside. And keep your hand up for me if you've been in the water. You might have been swimming, you might have been paddleboarding, surfing, you might have just dipped a toe in the water. Fantastic. And pop your hand down if you were taking part there. Now, the next question is up on the screen just now for you. What do you like about the ocean? So within your groups or your class, maybe we could have one or two answers. What do you like about the ocean? It might be something that you do when you go to the seaside. It might be something that you see. It might be something that you've learned maybe at school. And the next question, everybody, is the opposite of that. What don't you like about the ocean? So have a quick think. And again, we could maybe get one or two answers in your group. What don't you like about the ocean? Again, it might be something that you do when you go to the beach or something that you see when you go to the beach. I'll just give you a couple of seconds. And then the final question, everybody, is what do you already know about the ocean? So have a quick think. This could be a really amazing fact that you've maybe learned at school, you've maybe seen on the TV or read in a book. Has anybody got any great facts about the ocean? Okay, everyone. So moving on then. On the screen now is a list of some of my favourite facts about the ocean. So the ocean does a huge amount for us. One of the facts at the top here, which some of you might have already known, is that it covers about 70% of our planet. We live on a very watery planet, and over half of that is covered in salt water. So it's really, really important. The ocean also provides about half of all of the oxygen that we breathe. So as humans living on the planet, we need oxygen to breathe, to stay alive, and the ocean is actually providing about half of that for us. The ocean also absorbs about 30% of our carbon emissions. So as we live our day-to-day lives, we go out in cars, we maybe fly on aeroplanes, we produce something called carbon dioxide, which is a gas that goes out and is released into our atmosphere. And the ocean does a really, really helpful job for us here because it absorbs a percentage of that carbon dioxide for us. And then, of course, the ocean is also really important for providing things like food, jobs, medicine, and it helps to move objects and people around the world. And thinking then about what's so special about particularly Scotland's seas, which is what we're here to talk about today, the photo on the screen here, the kind of background photo, was actually taken under the water just off the Isle of Arran on the west coast of Scotland. And I think it's a really fantastic photograph because it really gives you a lovely idea of just how beautiful and how diverse our oceans in Scotland really are. Now, About 10% of Europe's coastline is made up of Scotland's coastline. So if you imagine the country of Scotland with all its kind of wiggly bays and islands, if you stretch that out into a big, big long line, it would equal about 10% of the whole coastline in Europe. In Scotland, we've also got over 50%, 61% of UK waters are actually within the area of Scotland. So we've got over half of UK waters here. We've also got this amazing diversity of different islands. It says on the screen here, over 800 islands around Scotland, islands of all different shapes and sizes, and these islands provide really important habitats for lots of different animals. And then finally, the best thing I think is that we have some amazing marine species. So lots and lots of different animals, some of which live in Scotland all year round, and some of which just migrate to Scotland in the summertime. So we're going to move on then, and I'm going to play a very quick video. Now, this video is a compilation of footage from under the water all around UK seas. And as the video is playing, I would like you all, please, to have a quick think about what species you can recognise as we go through the video. And then we'll Okay, everyone. So moving on then, that was a lovely video of some of the animals that we can find around UK waters. Now, the next part of this session is focusing on Scottish marine wildlife. So on the screen here, I have got 8 animals that you can see all around Scotland seas. And I'm going to go through each animal. I'm going to give you a little fact about each one of them, and of course, reveal the name as well. So you can guess along as we go through. Now, I'm going to start with the top left animal on your screen, which is a big, big grey animal, obviously in the water, and you can see it's got a really big mouth that's wide open. Anybody have any idea what this might be? And if you guessed a shark, you will be quite right. This animal is actually called a basking shark. And we love our basking sharks at Marine Conservation Society. They're really fascinating creatures. Now, the basking shark, you can see in the photo here, is a filter feeder. So it's got a big mouth that's wide open a lot of the time. And the basking shark has got its mouth open because it's filtering the water through the gills on the side of its body. And while it does that, it's also eating the tiny, tiny microscopic plankton that are floating around in the water. Okay, the next animal, everybody, moving along the top row, we've got a big grey animal again in the water. This is a slightly different animal to a shark though, and it's got a big blowhole on the top of its body that you can see in the photo here. And if you said this animal was a whale, then you were quite right. This animal is a humpback whale. The humpback whale is the second largest fish in the whole world, and we do get them in Scotland because they love our cold climate. They come up here to enjoy our cold seas. Now, moving on then, everyone, to number 3 along the top row. Again, this is a big, big animal that lives in the sea. Instead, this one is black and white instead of grey, though. And I wonder if anybody could have a guess about what this animal might be. It has two names, and I'm going to give you both names. Both are absolutely right. This animal is called an orca or a killer whale. So if you said either of those, then you were absolutely right. And even though this animal is called a killer whale, it's actually a species of dolphin. Now, orcas hunt in pods, which is basically the name for a group of whales or dolphins. They hunt in their pods, and they have been known to kill seals and whales and other animals in the water. Okay, then moving on to number 4. This animal's a bit different. Definitely not in the water, but it does go into the water to get fish. It's definitely a type of seabird. And if you said this animal was a puffin, then you were quite right. This is a small seabird that just comes to Scotland over the spring and summer time. So we don't have puffins here all year round. They actually migrate here to have their young on our cliffs and on our islands. Now, this photo on the screen is a really great example of the favourite food of a puffin, which is a sand eel. So you can see in the puffin's beak, he's got loads and loads of little thin silver fish. Those fish are called sand eels, and the puffin comes here to hunt sand eels and to feed its young with them. Fantastic. So moving on then, we're going down to the bottom row. These ones I think are a little bit trickier, particularly this next one. This is a big flat animal with a big long tail. We're back in the water here as well. It spends a lot of its time on the seabed. Any ideas what this animal might be? This animal is called a flapper skate. Now, I suspect in your groups you might have had some guesses about maybe a stingray or a manta ray, and you were right to maybe think this animal is a ray. It looks very similar, and it's a very similar species to a ray. But instead of a ray, this is called a skate, and we love flapper skates at Marine Conservation Society. A few years ago, off the coast of the Isle of Skye, on the west coast of Scotland, we found hundreds of flapper skate egg cases. So the little cases that the baby flapper skates were born in, and once they grow up, they kind of get themselves out of their case and grow up into adults. We found hundreds of those along the beaches near the Isle of Skye. So it's a really, really important breeding ground over there for the flapper skate. Okay, moving on then, we're going along the bottom row now. The next animal, this one's a bit easier, I think. You might be quite familiar with it if you've ever been rock pooling along the shoreline. This animal is a hermit crab. Now, a hermit crab is quite special. Again, if you imagine other crabs, shore crabs, edible crabs, they often have a lovely kind of hard protective shell on the back of their body. And that shell is there to protect themselves so they don't get attacked and they don't get eaten by other animals. Now, the hermit crab is a bit special because it doesn't have a lovely hard protective shell. Instead, it has to go and find an empty shell to live in. And that's so called why it has the name hermit crab. And as it gets bigger and bigger, it moves on and it finds bigger and bigger empty shells to live in. Now, the next animal, again, I think this is hopefully quite easy for some of you who are watching. This is a really big animal again. We're back in the deep parts of the water. This animal is a leatherback turtle. So if you guessed a turtle, you were absolutely right. Now, the leatherback turtle does come to Scotland sometimes, and it comes because it loves to come and feed on our jellyfish. We have a lot of jellyfish in Scotland, and the jellyfish is the leatherback turtle's favourite food. Now, the leatherback turtle is also the biggest turtle in the whole world. So we're really, really lucky to sometimes get sightings of that in Scotland. Okay, now the final animal, this is a bit of a funny creature, I think, and a little bit different to some of the other photos we've got on the screen here. The final animal is definitely a seashell, and it's sat on the seabed. It has got some little barnacles growing on it, but that's not the word I'm looking for. I wonder if you could give a quick guess in your classes. This animal is an oyster. So very well done if you said oyster. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about why we love oysters so much at Marine Conservation Society in a second. But moving on then quickly, just to think about how we can try and help the ocean. So there's lots of different things that we do at Marine Conservation Society to try and help our ocean. One of the really big things we do is we run beach cleans or litter picks in local areas. And we're also collecting data on that while we do those cleans. So we write down the type and the amount of litter that we're finding. And we use that so we can kind of properly understand what's going on on our shorelines in terms of litter. Another really cool thing we do is a lovely partnership project called the Big Seaweed Search. So we encourage people to go out and survey seaweeds for us. And the reason we're interested in seaweeds is because we want to try and track where different seaweed types are growing all around the UK and understand how they might be affected by climate change. Now, another thing we do, and this is a really nice one, an easy one to get involved with if you would like to, is our wildlife sighting survey. And this is really simple. If you're out on the beach or maybe on a boat and you see a jellyfish or a turtle, you'd be very lucky to see a turtle, but we do get sightings. Please come and tell us. You can go onto our website and you can log in your sighting via our data submission form. And another thing that we do at MCS is species restoration, and that's what we're going to move on to talk about just now. Now, we're involved in a number of really exciting restoration projects, and restoration is all around trying to improve and restore the animals and the habitats in the ocean. And I'm going to talk to you all quickly about one that's very local to me, where I live in Scotland. This project is called Restoration Forth, and this is based in the Firth of Forth. So if you live near Edinburgh or maybe in Fife or some of the Lothians, this area is the area that we are working in. And Restoration Forth has two kind of main aims, and we're working with two main species. The first one is the oyster. So we're planning to release about 30,000 oysters back into the water in the Firth of Forth. And we're also wanting to plant about 4 hectares of seagrass as well. Some of you might know a little bit about seagrass already. It's different to a seaweed. So on the screen here, the image on the left-hand side, it says algae at the top. Algae is another name for seaweed. All types of seaweed are a type of algae, and they grow in a very different way to other plants. But on the kind of middle of your screen, we've got a diagram for seagrass. So seagrass behaves in the same way as any other plant. It's got roots, it's got flowers, it's got leaves. The only difference with seagrass really is that it grows in the sea. It can cope with that salty water that we have in the sea. Now, to restore seagrass for Restoration Forth, the team firstly had to go up and harvest some seagrass seeds. So we don't have much seagrass growing in this area. So the team actually went up to Orkney. Now, Orkney has got some amazing, luscious, big seagrass meadows, a really, really long seagrass all growing really thickly along the shoreline. So the team went up there and they snorkeled, which you can see in the photo here, and they collected seagrass seeds from those lovely meadows on Orkney. Then they brought them back down to the Firth of Forth area near Edinburgh, and we processed them with loads and loads of volunteers. And the photos on the screen here just show the seeding events that we ran with volunteers. So we went out at certain times, especially when the tide was low, so we could access these areas, and we planted seagrass seeds at different areas all around the Firth of Forth. And I'm going to finish off telling you about our oysters. So we mentioned oysters a little bit before in the Scottish Marine Animals section. Oysters are really fantastic. We love them at MCS, not just because of what they are, but because of what they do as well. On the screen here, there's a whole range of different things that oysters can do for us. We call them ecosystem engineers. So they're a really fantastic species to be restoring. One of the things we're really interested in at Marine Conservation Society is this idea of biodiversity enhancement. All this means is that we're trying to improve and increase the amount of different animals that live in the ocean. And an oyster can do this really well because once we have lots and lots of oysters restored on the seabed, it creates a really lovely habitat for lots of other animals to live in and to find food. Now, a bit like our seagrass seeds, we had to go off and find some oysters because we don't have any locally. So these photos are actually taken from Little Loch Broom on the northwest coast of Scotland, where we went up to harvest our oysters, and they were grown on site by a special oyster farmer for us, and then we brought them back down to our restoration area. And to finish off with, this is a photo of us putting some of them back into the water. So our divers carried out lots of different surveys to see what areas will be good for our oysters to go back in. And then a few months ago, we put the first oysters back into the Firth of Forth for over 100 years. So a really historic occasion. Now, I'm going to leave you all then with a few different ways that you could maybe get involved and try and help our ocean in your own way. As I mentioned before, we do a lot of beach cleaning. We want to understand marine litter and what's going on there. So it's really important where you can to try and reduce, reuse and recycle. You could also run your own beach clean or your litter pick in your local area if you wanted to. You could create a little marine display or have a bit more learning around some of the things that we've talked about in this morning's session. You could also go onto our website where you'll find a whole range of lesson plans and activities which you could do in your own time or in your school as well. And the final thing is you could become an ocean-friendly school. Now, this is an award that we run every year with our fantastic learning team. They come in and they do a launch assembly, and then you work through to create some lovely evidence to show that you are an ocean-friendly school, and you get an award sent at the end of that. Now that brings me then to the end of my presentation, and we've got a little bit of time for some questions. So do pop your questions in the chat and we'll see how many we can get through. Thank you very much.
Caitlin, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. I learned so much watching that. I had no idea that Scotland could find sharks or turtles in our waters. I was sat there with a big smile on my face watching along. So thank you very much. And we see you, everyone who was putting your guesses of the marine life into the chat. Thank you so much for doing that. Now it's your chance to ask your very own questions to Caitlin. Caitlin, I've got a question to start things off though, which is, what's the sea creature that you would most like to see, or maybe that you have seen when you've been out working or traveling?
Brilliant. So this is a great question to start off, Patrick. Thank you. So first one, the one that I would love to see that I never have is, it has to be a turtle, right? Like they're so rare because they spend a lot of time in the very deep part of the water and they don't come up to the surface like dolphins and whales and sharks. We're pretty unlikely to see them. So we often see them out at sea on a boat and they very, very rarely come into land. So a turtle has to be right up there with an animal I'd love to see. But kind of on that line, the favorite animal that I maybe have seen during my work has to be the basking shark. So I saw basking sharks off the Isle of Skye on the west coast, and they spent a long time, there were 2 of them, they spent ages just going around this bay because they feed all the time because they're such a big animal and they need to feed a lot to get enough plankton to survive. They just went around this bay feeding for about half an hour, which was really, really magical. Yeah.
That's incredible. I really could have done with your expertise when I was on holiday a couple of years ago. We got a boat out to Islay, the island of Islay.
Oh, fab.
And we saw these big sea creatures, but I have no idea what they were. So I really could have done with some knowledge there.
Definitely.
We have a live question next for you, Caitlin. It's from Miss Emo, and it's Cameron. Thank you, Cameron. Do basking sharks chew their food? What a great question.
Brilliant question. Thank you very much, Cameron. So no, basking sharks do not chew their food. Basking sharks have no teeth. And as I mentioned before, because they're filter feeders, like fish. So if you think of a fish with the gills on the side of its body, a basking shark feeds in exactly the same way. So it's got its mouth open, the water's streaming in, going through its gills, and then those gills capture all of the tiny, tiny, tiny plankton that we can't actually really see with the naked eye. And that plankton then goes down into the basking shark's belly. So no, basking sharks do not chew their food.
Maybe I'm a basking shark as well. I was getting told off for not chewing my food properly. We've got another live question next. And it's the same class, I think. This is from Fraser. Thank you, Fraser. What a great question. How did animals get in the sea?
Wow, this is a good question, Fraser. How long have you got? Animals, we think that a lot of animals actually evolved from the sea. So they actually started life in the sea, and then eventually they evolved to be able to live and breathe on land, which is really interesting. So rather than thinking about animals that started their life on land, we kind of think about it in the reverse way, that actually a lot of our very old, very historic, prehistoric animals actually started their life in the sea.
That's brilliant. And I think we're getting loads and loads of live questions through, which is absolutely fantastic. So without further ado, let's move on to the next one. Another one, same class. Jess, do orcas hurt you, or are they friendly animals? Good question.
Good question. So I mentioned in my presentation that orcas are quite aggressive, okay? And you might have seen on the TV, often TV shows like Blue Planet show some amazing clips of orcas actually hunting. And it can be quite aggressive and a bit scary. I would definitely say that with an orca, we want to be really careful around these sorts of animals. As I mentioned, they're very aggressive. They wouldn't necessarily notice if you were a person or a seal in the water, and they often go after seals and other whales, but they are definitely an animal to be wary of, I think would be the best way to put it.
Can I ask the same question about basking sharks?
Definitely. So basking sharks, very different. So in Scotland, there are certain companies that actually run basking shark tours where
Oh,
you
wow.
go out onto a boat, and then if you see a basking shark, you're all kind of snorkeled up in your gear and you drop off into the water and you can snorkel next to a basking shark. They won't hurt you. They are completely, completely harmless because they're not looking for food that is as big as us. They're only really looking for plankton. So you are very safe to swim near a basking shark. You just might want to be cautious of its tail as it maybe flips by you in the water.
Well, that makes me feel a lot better about going back into the sea. We have another live question from Alex. Thank you, Alex. Oh, wow. How many sea creatures are, and I'm sure you've counted, Caitlin, how many sea creatures are there in the sea at the moment?
That's a great question, Alex. I don't have a perfect number off the top of my head. We have millions and millions of animals in the sea at the moment, though, and that's something that we're really working towards is increasing the biodiversity in our seas. And biodiversity is just another word for the range of creatures, kind of from big to small and all the different habitats in the ocean. But currently we have millions and millions in the ocean.
Fantastic. And another live question coming up. We'll try and get through as many as we can. Thank you so much, everyone. It's great. From Bonnie, how many types of sharks are there?
Great. So I actually don't have, this is a really good question, Bonnie, because I don't know how many we have. In the UK, obviously, we do have the basking shark, but you'll be familiar with some of the bigger ones. Great white shark is a really common, obvious one. And things like a bull shark as well, a cat shark. There's lots and lots of different varieties of shark. We don't have that many in the UK. A lot of them are kind of on the other side of the world. But I could definitely look that up for you if you were interested to know.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll provide details to get in touch with the Marine Conservation Society at the end. So you can ask any more questions. We'll try and get through as many as we can just now. So thank you, Bonnie. We've got another one coming up from Fraser. Good question again. Is there any venomous stuff in the sea?
There is definitely some venomous stuff in the sea, Fraser, yes. So in Scotland, kind of the obvious one to maybe talk about is the jellyfish. So not all jellyfish have stings, but some of them have really strong, painful stings, and they are venomous to humans. So we do get a whole range of different, actually, jellyfish in Scotland and across the UK. As I said, some of them you could touch and you wouldn't be harmed. They don't sting, or the sting can't get through human skin. Others, though, have those long, long tentacles that you have to be quite cautious of, maybe if you're snorkeling or swimming in the water, because those tentacles can get tangled up, wrapped around you, and can kind of get under your wetsuit as well. So they're venomous. Another animal that does have a very strong sting is an animal called a weaver fish. Don't know if any of you have maybe heard of it, but a weaver fish buries itself under the sand along the shoreline. And as it feels kind of pressure, so as somebody maybe walks along or an animal walks along, it sticks up its venomous sting into the bottom of whatever it might be. So that could be into your foot, it could be into another animal, and that's called a weaver fish. And we do get those in Scotland as well. So always worth just keeping an eye out for animals like that.
Understood.
I wouldn't say be scared to go to the beach though, Patrick. It's okay.
Okay, I'm saying I can still put my trunks on and go to the beach.
Yeah.
We have another live question. Thank you, Fraser. Oh, great question from Arthur. What is the biggest Scottish fish?
Brilliant question. So the biggest Scottish fish is the basking shark. Sharks are a type of fish. The basking shark is actually the second biggest fish in the whole world. So we're very, very lucky to have this animal in Scottish waters.
That's fantastic. And we've got time for one last question. I think we could have put this session on for 3 hours, Caitlin.
Definitely.
But let's see what the last question is. It's from Murray. And it's the opposite. So what is the
Excellent.
smallest sea creature in Scotland?
Brilliant. What a great question to finish on. So, as I mentioned, we have something called plankton in our water, which are basically tiny, tiny microscopic animals. If you can see them with the naked eye, they're often in a big cloud in the water. So you would kind of see them as maybe a big cloud floating in the water, but kind of individuals are really, really, really small. There's also a lot of very, very small kind of algae. So I mentioned algae briefly when we talked about seaweed. So there's very, very small kind of communities, I suppose, of algae that grow on other bits of seaweed, that grow on rocks, that would also count there as well. Great question.
Yeah, thank you, Murray, and thank you, Miss Emo, for typing all of those out. I'm sure you've had lots more questions, but just a reminder that I'm sure Caitlin and the Marine Conservation Society would be happy to answer any questions that you've got. But unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. I'd like to say a big thank you from Glasgow Science Centre to you, Caitlin. It's been great to talk to you, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Thanks for having me.
And thank you to you, our audience, for your brilliant questions. If you'd like to find out more about marine conservation, you can find out more in the Our Planet section on the Curious About website at curiousabout.glasgowsciencecentre.org. You can also find lots more interesting content, videos, activities, and games on the website as well. And all of these events are recorded, so they'll be available to playback straight after this in the live sessions section of the website, in case you missed the start or you want to watch it again. Please let us know what you thought of this session. There's a very quick survey appearing in the YouTube chat box just now. But until next time, thank you and goodbye.